I'm really glad you're here. So thanks again for being here.
Thanks for having me.
How did you discover this crazy world of music and advertising?
So I moved to New York City way back in 2001. And I went there because I had started a band. So I moved in and was trying to, have rehearsals and meet players and play in the bars, the band thing that many of us have done. I lived in a little apartment. My drummers sublet a tiny room, worked day jobs, answering phones at different companies. And one time this young woman, my now wife, said, wouldn't it be cool if music were also your day job? And at first I said, no, I'm going to be a rock star. This is just to make some money. I would never want to do that. She prompted me again. I thought, well, maybe that's cool. And I don't know how I got the idea for advertising music, but I will say that I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anything about the business. I know many wonderful people in this business. Many of them, not knocking them, had a friend or their dad, or they knew something about how it works. And I will say I didn't know anything. And I sat at my office job in 2002 and Googled commercial music studio and spent like 9 months using all my work time, compiling a huge Excel spreadsheet, researching, looking at websites, writing down names, emails, just spending all my time. And at the time, I didn't have any capability on a DAW. I was a singer-songwriter, had a band, and I lived with my bass player, who was a very accomplished engineer, self-taught. And I would have him kind of show me some Pro Tools. So I decided to finally reach out to these commercial music studios. So I had him engineer for me a demo where I made fake commercials, and I packaged that all up, and I physically, it's 2003, physically sent them out. I remember going to the post office and being late for work and waiting and spending all this money. I think 2 out of maybe 50 or 60 responded, and they recommended I meet a person who manages singers. And I went and met with them, and I signed with this, basically it was a commercial vocalist talent agency. And through that, I started going around to the studios as a session singer. I want to preface this by saying many things that used to happen now don't really happen. For the record, I love what I do. I wouldn't want to do anything else. It's a great job. Most composers I know go from 0 to complaining in about 5 seconds. I'm always the first one to pull back and say, but let's not forget we love what we do and we're lucky to do it. But in 2003, you could bounce around as a singer and do 3 sessions a day and all these demos. In fact, the first day I ever sang as a professional, I booked a final. I thought, oh, this is easy. Is this how it's going to be? Little did I know that's not how it works. No. So I got to see the inside of the New York City music houses as a singer, and leaning over the shoulder and seeing Pro Tools. What's that? What does that do? My computer can't do that. And gradually, a couple of years later, started to be able to make my own very primitive sessions.
So you heard that saying that behind every good man, there's a great woman.
Definitely.
Imagine if she didn't orient you, or at least open your eye to the possibility of this. I mean, could you imagine yourself doing what you thought you would be doing instead of being pragmatic and actually doing what you're doing? I
know, and I'm sure many of us know, very talented people that's never left that day job, never stopped working in retail or working in the restaurant. They kept their blinders on and just kept trying to do the same things over and over, year after year. And because I expanded in this direction, it opened up all these other doors. That suggestion really created my adult professional life, and I credit her and thank her for it repeatedly.
That's amazing. This is what we teach. 50 hard reels mailed through the post office, 1 or 2 replies. Now, I want you guys to visit Watt's website. You'll see that the level of music and the variety of music that you produce is world class. I mean, the most astonishing thing about you is how you can do a true to genre urban track, turn around, do a rock and roll track, turn around and do a classical music track. At the time when you were breaking in, things were different. We were sending hard copy reels. Persistence is key. What would be your, as you look back, as you think about why you are now paying your bills, making music for brands, and why you have a steady career in this industry, what are the absolutely essential takeaways?
The most important thing you can have, I think, to do this or any kind of music production is the taste, the ears, and the sensibility. I've met plenty of out of Berkeley, and I hear their tracks and they're just, sorry guys, they're terrible. Doesn't mean they're not very talented musicians. There's just a certain sensibility to dial in a direction and to hit it and still hit it with sincere creative energy. You got to be able to work with people. There's no player or composer who's so good that they'll invite you back if you're a pain in the ass. No one will work with someone who's not fun to hang out with just because they're great. Unless you're a star who brings people in, then they have to work with you. But assuming you're one of us regular talented people who aren't a name, you got to be cool. They have to want to hang out with you. There are less than ideal scenarios that you're going to run into, jobs that come up that aren't the best, and you have to really navigate for yourself if it's worth it. I'm in this for the long haul. I've been doing this, I guess, for 17 years or so, and many people I knew at the beginning are still involved, and no one ever forgets you doing a great job. Within reason, hanging with people who might, if they're cool, as long as they treat you with respect, roll with some of the punches professionally. Creatively, I think it comes down to ideas. 10 demos would come in, and I remember one composer, his sounds weren't the best. His productions didn't blow your mind, but he always submitted something with an opinion, a creative opinion. And it wasn't always even what the brief asked for, but you could never tell him, oh, go back to the drawing board, because darn it, he gave me something it's legitimate. Yeah, it's got an opinion, so I'm going to submit that too. And who knows, that might turn the tables on the client. Oh, we asked for this, but look at this. We didn't think about that. So I think always turn in something that has an opinion, because I know plenty of people whose sounds are great, but the ideas don't always pop.
Really, the kind of opportunities you're going to have are because of the kind of person that you are. So like craft is one thing, but like, are you reading good books? Are you somebody interesting? Can you actually hold a conversation? Can you walk in the room and just be a person of interest? I mean, that's huge because we're craftspeople, right? And I find as more and more musicians enter and it becomes more and more competitive, it's really those things that make you stand out. The sensibility, as you said. Let me get really pragmatic now and specific. You are executive creative director at Massive Music. I'm sure you got emails from musicians. What made you notice certain emails and what made you ignore certain emails?
I would say in the email, keep it very simple. Don't make it long. The ones that I thought were ridiculous would say they'd introduce themselves and then ask for permission to submit a reel. This is your email, man. This is the chance. Don't, instigate another email. It needs to be right there. I need a hyperlink, and I only want to see one or two things recent that I'm very proud of. If this is interesting to you, check it out. You don't need to send an enormous playlist. Here's a link to my catalog. Personally, I like to put something unique in the subject line, something quirky, something that gets your attention. I did the music for a TV show about people that live in the woods off the grid and they hunt squirrels. And I think I said, I'm the best squirrel hunting composer in New York City or something stupid, but people opened that email. I wasn't the best at seeking out new talent because again, once you have that core 10 or 15 people, you're always under the gun. You're always quickly, it's not, oh, remember that kid that I had coffee with 4 months ago? It's always like, let me go to, the usual suspects. How do you become one of those? It's hard. It's hard to say.
Having said this, let me paint you a picture. You're working on a job as a producer. I just happened to email you at the right time.
Yes.
Really cool subject line. Hey, Watt, big fan. Love the thing you did 2 years ago. Very specific. Look, man, I think I'm coming with some interesting things here. I'm ready to go. Happy to demo for free for you, just so you see what the vibe is. If you like it, you might be tempted to use me as a wild card, what we call a wild card.
I think that's a good approach, being pretty forward and confident, but cool about it. You could offer to do the first one for free. I have done that. I have offered that. Usually they don't take you up on it, but they might, and there's no harm in doing that. You can't predict timing, but if you are constantly staying on your list of contacts, trying to reach out. I had a friend that I had recently reconnected with when I was in-house, who one day I was sitting around with my other producer talking about who should we get on this job. And I got an email and the subject says, hey man, send me the brief. Now I happen to know this guy, but guess what? We sent him the brief.
Yeah.
And he went on to win the job. No, he didn't win the job. But the point is, yes, that can work. I used to know a producer who I don't admire in his professionalism. He's very sleazy. And of course, he's also very successful. Don't you hate that? But I will say this, he used to every day, years ago, he had his little early, digital organizer, and he would go through and just call everybody on his address book throughout the day. He would just call, what's going on? What you working on? How you doing? How are you? Just because he's that type. Many of us don't have that type of personality, but if you can force yourself to do that kind of thing, just check in. Don't sell yourself all the time. How are you? What's going on? What's new? What could I help with? That's really cool. No, there's no strings attached. And I'm saying this because I want to be better at it too. It doesn't always go hand in hand to be that kind of outgoing, sell yourself and be a real creative person like we are, creative hobbits. But if you can force yourself to do that and just have no pressure, you don't have to talk a big game. You don't have to have a lot of going on yourself. It's better just to ask, what are you working on? How are you doing? What's new? Certainly, you're right. You don't have to pick one lane or the other. We should all be doing both if we feel inspired. Work on your original music, work on whatever jobs, that we can do for advertising or whatever they be. They all make you better writers. When I first started just as a singer in the ad world, the woman who managed me, who was pretty wise, said, don't start writing for commercials. It'll make you a worse songwriter. Worst piece of advice I ever heard. It made me a much better songwriter because you have to stay focused. It keeps you, your ability to arrange and just think about genre and structure and just hit a deadline. I mean, these are very valuable tools as songwriters. Made me a much better songwriter. She was wrong. And I don't think it makes you more attractive to like, oh, let's hire this composer. They have a lot of Spotify streams, but it certainly adds some clout. It's a talking point. I think when we sell ourselves, people would rather hear about other things you do. I mean, yes, we want to know that you can score this car ad, but it's more fun to hear about your original one-man band you do on the street, or these original songs, or children's music, just things that just paint a picture, the total picture of your creative personality. It doesn't hurt, but no one's going to say, well, let's hire this guy because their original music gets listened to a lot. But I'll quickly tell that story. A friend of mine was doing full-length songs for a movie trailer house. I looked up some of these companies and did the same thing. I just cold reached out. They said, oh, okay, well, maybe you can try something in this direction. And I did a few things that were like electro pop and they didn't quite land. Maybe we want some stuff that's more muscular, a little more rock. And I ended up making a batch of songs and they thought, oh, these are cool. Well, we'll try to license them. And nothing happened. One day I Googled it and someone had made a fan video of one of these songs and it had 1 million views. I thought, what does this mean? Some kid in Russia, and they started making these fan videos where they cut footage to my songs. And next thing we knew, there were 5 million and 10 million and 20 million. We got the stuff on Spotify and that spilled over into the Spotify streaming. So that whole thing happened by accident because I wanted to make full-length songs that are more relevant to what I like to do as an artist. And that created this whole new original music identity for me within working in ads years after quitting the band. It's really crazy to have this like artist career and these streams, which completely came out of nowhere. I know many amazing artists on Spotify that have no listens, and I can't believe it. That's just a pure lucky crapshoot. But if you keep putting great stuff out there, eventually good things will come back. It might take a while, like a comet. It takes a long time to come around, but staying at it, staying on people and making great stuff, as dumb as that sounds, never hurt. I think the beauty of working in the ad music world and TV music world is these deadlines are gifts. I know when this track's going to be done. Thursday at 12. That's when it's due. So I know Thursday afternoon I'm free. The hard thing is the like original music projects that I'm working on in the background. Those this past year have really become hard to delegate time because when something's due Friday, how can I sit for 3 hours and edit vocals for my own song? I need to get this done. Having deadlines helps me. I'm like an ADHD kind of attention deficit guy, and I found little methods of keeping myself motivated. I get all set up to work on project A, and then I think, ooh, project B, I want to work on that for an hour. I always like to be working on something I'm probably not supposed to be doing right now. It keeps me, I don't know, it feels mischievous. Either way, I'm always being productive. So I guess for me, I'm usually dealing with a deadline, which kind of sets the time parameters for me. I think the deadlines are a gift. I think they force me to prioritize. I had a friend who's a very talented guitar player and engineer, and he's a songwriter. A guy also who's never finished his own original music. I love the guy to death. And there was a commercial demo. I said, hey, you should chip in on this. And he was going to collaborate with his friend at the studio. And the deadline passed, and I was texting him and eventually got a hold of him. And he said, oh yeah, sorry, man. We just couldn't get inspired. We couldn't think of anything. That's how you know you're not cut out. You are always inspired. It's your job to be inspired. And if you're not inspired, then manufacture inspiration because something's due. And if you can't do it, then this isn't for you.
If you look at pros, it's not just the ad industry. You look at the Motown talent, they were constantly on the clock, like writing thousands of hits for everybody. So like, that's what the pros do. I read biographies of great authors and they go, I don't have time for inspiration. I just sit down and maybe it strikes and maybe it doesn't, but I sit down every day.
I mean, the fact that we have to be writers and engineers is so insane. I think it's incredible. Like I am on a Facebook chat group with a bunch of composers in the advertising world, and all we talk about is technology and money and RAM. And I liken it to a group of poets who only talk about font size and ink quality and book binding. You got a good binder? What kind of glue are they using? Like no one ever talks about music, and I get it, and it's very useful. I learn a lot, but don't ever forget we got into this to be artists, to be creative, and that's usually what someone who's super successful has the luxury of saying. But don't forget, we should never forget it. It's so easy to get lost.
Look how many people have access to music making tools. So when we were breaking into the business, like 15 years ago or so, there was less people, and that's okay. It just means that we cannot afford anymore to do a drum loop with a guitar and a whistle over it. You just can't. 15 years ago, you could still be the tambourine, clappy, whistly guy. And it'd be like, oh, he's got that advertising sound out. But the cool thing now is like the taste in music, even in the commercial world, like for brands has totally, it's wide open. What used to be underground 15 years ago is now like fully commercial. And so that means we just have to really, really strive to be more artistic. Because I notice a lot of you guys are being very tentative with your reels and your emails. You're like, no, I want to play it safe, you know? That's going to kill you completely right now because they already got safe for years to come.
That's true. So standing out helps in any one way. Keep it simple and stand out. Share one thing that's great, that gets people's attention. And then they will want to explore and learn more about who you are and what you do. Sonics are overrated. Technology is overrated. I was inspired early in my career by two guys that made a ton of music for TV and film. Smashing business, these guys. And they had one guitar and like a promotional Budweiser bass that was like a free giveaway at some contest. The worst equipment, and their track sounded great because they had great ideas and they're great producers. Just a little setup, humble setup, and they made great sounding stuff because they had great ears. And don't ever get lost in all this gear and technology. Like, get the good stuff, get the basics, and keep your ideas sharp.
That's going to be more important going forward.
Client doesn't know. The kids don't know what gear you're using. They don't care.
Already so advanced that it's like free, a lot of the great stuff. So then it's not that's going to make a difference. What's actually going to make a difference is going back to being human and being interesting when you record yourself singing, talking, doing whatever. I mean, guys, that's like the next cool thing.
I think I know so little that it's starting to come around and be in fashion. Listen to some of the new stuff or Billie Eilish record. These things they are distorting. You're not hearing things. It's technically not sonically accurate, but guess what? It sounds good and people like it. So don't overthink it. Always work on that aspect, but don't ever forget what's really communicating. What are people really reacting to? The kids or the client? It's a fine line, but don't get hung up on it. Your creativity is more important than the sonics or the room resonating, or I'm just making excuses for knowing precious little about that stuff. I have worked with some people for over a decade that I've never met. And I live in New York City, where you can meet a lot of people. And certainly from my experience working in-house for a total of maybe 6 years, almost never met any of the composers. So I think it's okay. It doesn't really matter where you are at this point. We work with composers in Israel and in Spain and in Vancouver and in Tokyo. Tokyo is tricky because of the timing, but it doesn't matter where you are at this point. Clearly, even prior to pandemic, you have access to the same websites as I do. And I'm reaching out to music houses in Europe. And you can reach out to music houses in Los Angeles. And in fact, lead with that. Wow, Swiss composer, what are you all about? That's a hook. That adds to your essence. That seems cool to someone in Los Angeles. It's beneficial in LA or New York to have people in different time zones because, oh, wait a minute, this is a quick job, but they're 3 hours in the past. Or, you know what I mean? So that can be it can work to your advantage to be in a very different time zone. I definitely don't use any magic. I use just the most average stuff. I have one guitar. I basically use one guitar, one bass, one acoustic. I don't have a room full of instruments. Eye of the Storm is the song that happened to be the one that caught on fire that has like 100 million YouTube views and 40 million Spotify. It's just, and it doesn't stop. It streams like 1 million times a month and I don't do anything. I never promoted it. But it happens to be a song that I did put a lot of effort into. And it's just a big hodgepodge. I made it on an old, slow Mac tower with 16 gigs of RAM. And the drums are a hodgepodge of just random samples I placed on the grid manually. I have one outboard, I just use I'm telling you guys, I don't know gear, man. I don't even know what I have. A UA LA610, I run the guitars through, an Apollo Twin, and that's it. Nothing fancy. It's just, it happened to be a mix that worked. Not because I was such a master of the mix, it just came out really well. I still like the way that sounds.
You don't want to be a master at a game that's not worth winning.
No, it's not. Someone has made wonderful trap hat samples. Just grab one.
Yeah. Don't spend 6 hours on your kick. It's going to make a difference.
Somebody did that already for you. Use that one.
That's right.
I think those things formed earlier in my life where I was sort of just like this monk, solely focused on music, where I didn't have anything going on. I had no overhead. I would just write songs all day. But I was I think early on, I developed discipline vocal training. I would just practice vocals and take notes and review them every day and really work on the craft aspect of it. And I think that's carried over. Once kind of life takes over, at least for me, it's hard to find time to do anything like that. But I think I'm benefiting from having done that as a younger musician, staying focused, treating it like a job, treating it like a discipline, treating creativity like a discipline, something you should do all the time. You have time, write a song. You have time, work on learning something new in your DAW or whatever that is. So I do keep that. It's kind of like running. I try to keep singing going all the time, because when you get that call, they need it immediately. And it is kind of like a meditation, creativity. I guess it is a little escape. Don't tell my wife I said that, but I do love to do it. It's a weird game when they know you love what you do. They think they can take advantage of you. It's very hard to be an actor, a singer, performer, a creative person, because the powers that be know you. People do this for free. I can get someone to do this for nothing. Don't fall into that trap. Love what you do, but make sure represent yourself. Make sure you're getting treated fairly, and play the game with people you trust. Maybe take on the crappy job as long as they apologize and promise you the next one is better, and then see if that's true. If it's not, then don't work with them again. That's my only other general advice: is work with people who don't try to own your demos. It's not worth it. And you can be nice. You can say, I prefer if I can retain use of these, and you can continue to pitch them, but I need to keep this. I'm building a library, but you got to keep those tracks, because otherwise most of the work you do isn't going to win. And that's okay, because guess what? You made a great track, put it in this folder. Thank you for having me. This is really fun. Again, doing what we do, a lot of us really do work in these little cubicles, and there isn't a lot of opportunity to express and talk about this intense little world we inhabit. But I will say, the best couple of things that have happened to me as a professional musician all came from shots in the dark. I just took a chance. It sounds corny, but I stay with it, keep doing great stuff, and don't think, well, they'll never listen to me, or I can't do that. It's the corniest thing you'll ever hear. And many times it's not going to work. But you can't be daunted. You got to have a really thick skin. Don't get jaded. Keep that little core of optimism. Whatever got you started in this in the first place, seal it in a little container and keep it in your core, and don't lose that. If that goes out, then you're done for, because there might be a time where you just say, this is bullshit. I can't handle this. But if you're really meant to survive in the game, you will. Just stick with it and stay inspired. Stay inspired. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Take care.
So, bye.
Oh.